Welcome to class number 2, JavaScript Basics, Program Structure and Functions. In this class, we will start introducing some of the fundamental concepts of JavaScript, including what a JavaScript program is, what a typical structure looks like, what are statements, what are variables, what are functions. So basically start introducing you to JavaScript programming. Today we'll go through JavaScript tutorial. We're going to be using JavaScript as a programming language. So we'll give you a brief background on JavaScript and talk a little bit about values, types, and operators, which are very typical in any programming language. Then we'll cover the programming structure and of course the functions. And then I'll also show you an electronic book that we follow for JavaScript. For some of the materials that I cover here, they're directly taken from the book. So you'll see a one-to-one correspondence between the class as well as the book as well. What did we do last class? We set up our PC. We created a folder called IGLFB bot folder. After this, I'll share my screen and show how I have set up in my PC. So you can compare that with your PC or Mac. After that, we can get into the tutorial. So that's what we did. We created a bot folder. We called it IGLFB bot folder. And we learned how to use some command prompts. In PC, there is a command prompt or a terminal window in Mac. So we learned how to use that. We use very simple commands. The most often commands in the terminal was change directory CD and dir for directory. And for Mac, it is ls, list the files. We downloaded and installed a program called node.js. So node.js is the largest open source software for JavaScript programmers. So we're going to be using node.js in this project. And we wrote a very simple hello.js, which I'll show you in a minute. And we ran using Node. We also downloaded another package called ngrok. Ngrok is a program that allows our software running on our PC to be made available on the internet. So the chatbot, the Facebook chatbot, we're going to be writing in this class, in this course actually, will be running on our PC, whether it is Windows PC or Mac. And in order for us to access the Facebook cloud from our Facebook chatbot, we need to make sure that our PC or Mac is exposed to the external world in a secured way. So there are a number of software packages that allow us to do, and ngrok is one of them, and that is also approved by Facebook. So I'll also show you how you run that. So basically, when you run ngrok, it gives you a URL. It's basically an address that you can publish it to Facebook, and so that Facebook can contact you whenever somebody sends a message. It can come into your chatbot, and vice versa. It allows communication between your PC and the Facebook cloud in a secured manner. What I would do is recommend is practice the following steps many times. Make sure that you're able to run JavaScript programs on Node and make sure that it is running for you. Okay. So what I'll do now, let me share my screen and walk you through what we did in the last class. So let me share my screen. Okay, so on my desktop, I have a folder called IGLFB bot, and so here is a very simple hello.js that we wrote last class. So let me double click on it. We also install a program called Notepad++. Notepad++ is a little better text editor that is more. It is aware of the programming language, whether it is C, C++, or Java, JavaScript. Many programs it understands. So For example, I can show hello.js in here, and it's a very simple one-line program that we wrote last class. It's a simple statement that says print welcome to IGL Facebook chatbot June 2nd, 2019. Console.log means you display that on the terminal. So this is the very first program that we wrote, and we also can run this. So let us say in your PC or Mac, it's a command prompt. So this is a program. It's a terminal program. It's not a graphical user interface based program. So this is what we need to run Node. As you know, Node.js has no UI. It's not a Windows-based system. It is terminal-based system. So, for example, I can go to my directory. The command is cd desktop. So that's where I kept my folder. So the next command is cd igl fb bot. So this is the folder that we created last week. So if I do a dir, which is the directory, you can see all the files in here. So our hello.js, a few other files that I kept it in there. We'll talk about that later on. But hello.js is the one that we just saw. And the way you run the program is by typing node hello.js. So as you can see, it ran the program and displayed welcome to IGL Facebook chatbot. So here is, let's say if I change it to June 9th. All right, so we're going to modify the program, hello.js. Let me save it. And one of the features of the command prompt is by just pressing up arrow, you can look at all the commands that we have given in the past. So for example, we gave cd desktop, we did igl fb bot directory. So I'm going to run hello.js. Now it is displaying the June 9th. So as you can see, so that's what we have done so far. And we also installed a program called ngrok. So one of the program that we installed is called ngrok. So I can type in ngrok http 3000. So what this means is we are telling the program ngrok that please expose applications that are listening in at port 3000, and the protocol that we're interested is HTTP, which is the web protocol. So when I give that, as you can see, it allows, it provides a few URLs, and this HTTPS, a random looking URL, is what we will use to publish it to Facebook Cloud. So Facebook Cloud will use this particular URL that is highlighted here to access our chatbot, which is running on our PC. So just don't worry about it if it is going over here. When we do the actual programming, you will come to know. All right. So let me go back to the presentation. So this is what we did. We created a folder. We installed node.js. We ran hello.js, a very first line program. We installed ngrok and make sure that it is running fine. So I'd like to make sure that on your PC, you're able to do both of them, because those two are essential tools, the node.js and ngrok. And if you have any difficulty, please do reach out to me. Okay, so today what we will do, we'll talk about JavaScript, brief background on JavaScript. It started out in 1995. So that's when the web pages were becoming popular, and people were looking at how to add programs to web pages. The web pages in the mid 90s was very static. That means, let's say if you go to Macy's.com or McDonald's.com, any one of these companies' website, you will have information in terms of what they do, what products that they offer, what services that they offer, how to contact them, phone numbers, and very static information. It doesn't change that often. But people wanted to have some sort of adding some program. For example, they wanted to get customer feedback. They want you to fill up a form for ordering any products from their website. So they wanted to add some programming capability, and that's how JavaScript was born. Whereas JavaScript is a scripting language. So scripting language does not require a compiler. So the environment already has what we call as interpreter. So it interprets the programming language. So JavaScript usually when it started out, it was part of the browser. So you write the JavaScript code. Even today, you can go to any web page, just about any website. You can look at the source of the page. You will be able to see JavaScript code in there. So basically, the JavaScript is interpreted by the browser because the browser had an interpreter for JavaScript. So other than that, the syntax are very similar. You will see that some of the statements between Java and JavaScript are very similar, but the way they are used is entirely different. One is a procedural language, the other one is a scripting language. But nowadays, not only they are used in browser, for example, JavaScript, people are beginning to use in MongoDB and other programs. So that means even in desktop environments. So this is why we are using Node.js, where when we run Node.js on our PC, we're not using under the browser, right? So it's almost like as if you're running a Java program, but it is running in your desktop environment. So for this project, we'll use JavaScript as a primary programming language. By the way, the numbers here in these presentations refer to the chapter in the ebook, the Eloquent JavaScript. So first, we talk about values, types, and operators. If you take any programming language, whether it is C, Java, or JavaScript, or Python, whatever it is, they all deal with numbers. So numbers and strings. I gave 11 as an example, and string is typically given in quotes, double quotes. So here is an example of a string called hello world, and a lot of them deal with the Boolean operators. That Boolean means it's a binary, it's yes or a no type of values. And there are operators. What are operators? Addition is an operator, subtraction, logical operators. If this and that, or this or that, it's not this. So those are called logical operators. Then we have comparison operators. You compare two numbers, whether 11 is less than 10. So less than is a classic operator. Greater than, equal to, not equal to. So these are comparison operators. Of course, the arithmetic operators are add, subtract, multiply, divide, modulo, and so on. So just a brief introduction to some of these things. You will get more information on the book itself. But a lot of the times, when you start programming, these things will become natural to you. When you want to do something with a variable, then you will assign a number to it, or a string to it, or a Boolean to it. And then when you want to do any operation, you want to add something, or you want to compare two things. So these things will become more natural as we get into the programming. But the fundamentals of it is there are values, there are types, whether it's a number or a string, and then there are several operators, whether it is logical operator, comparison operators, or arithmetic operators. Programming structure. Again, it goes and refers to the chapter 2 of the book. In JavaScript, there are expressions and statements. What's an expression? Expression, I gave an example like 5 times 5 is an expression. So it's just an example of an expression. When we say count equal to 5 times 5 is a statement. So in JavaScript, we call that as a statement. So when we say count equal to 5 times time, we are defining a variable called count, and we are assigning it to the value 5 times 5, which is 25. So the way you do that is you write that in the form of a statement. The next one is a variable. Variable is something like similar to what I just said as count. It catch and hold values. Another example of a variable, the way you declare a variable in JavaScript by having a reserved word called var, followed by the name of the variable. This is something that you can give. For example, I'd given player as the name of the variable, and I'm assigning it a value, and this will be a string value. So just like we showed in the previous slide, I'm assigning the value John, which is a string, and to a variable called player. So after this statement is executed, the player variable will contain John. Likewise, I can give var count equal to 10. After this statement is executed, the variable count will have value of 10. And in JavaScript, we have several keywords and reserved words, like for example, var, static, if, else. There's a long list, so you'll find them in the book as well. So in summary, typical program structure has expressions and statements, and generally statements involve some variables. You will assign some value to the variables. They can be number, or they could be strings. Functions is another important aspect of a program structure. What's a function? It's a piece of program that does a specific thing. So you want certain things to be done repetitively. We'll give you some examples as we go along, but any piece of program that does a specific thing is called a function. And invoking and calling a function is something that we learn as we go along. So you call a function, and the function may do X, Y, and Z. And typically functions have arguments that they are called inputs. So every function will have an input, and then it operates on the input, does something to it, and then it outputs. It gives you some output. So those are called the arguments of a function. I gave an example here, console.log, our very first hello.js program, right? So that we wrote, I think I need to just a moment, yeah. So the console.log, if you remember, the very first hello.js is a function. Console.log is a function. It's quite often used for debugging our program. So anytime you want to see, hey, what is the value of this variable, or where are we in this program? Typically, we write using console.log. And here is an example of a statement using a function. So console.log, the value of the player is comma player. So this console.log is a function. It has two arguments. The very first thing is a string. So it will just display the string as is on the terminal. And then it takes a value of the player. If you remember, player was John, right? So when you execute this function, it will say the value of the player is John, because we are also asking the computer to display the value of the player. Here is another example. You can say console.log math max 2, 4. So math is another function. It takes a maximum of 2 and 4 and displays it. The console.log displays it. So here is another example of using function, and it takes a maximum of 2 and 4, which is 4, and it will display 4 on your terminal. So if this is a little bit complicated, don't worry about it. A lot of the times reading theory on a programming language could be boring, but we need to go through that in one class, but you'll get more experience as we get into writing more programs. And nothing like getting your feet wet with writing programs. So that's about functions. And another interesting aspect, or an important aspect of a programming structure, is what we call as conditional execution. And JavaScript offers 4 different conditional execution mechanisms. First one is called if statement. So here is an example. if player equal to John. As you know, the equal to sign is for assignment. So basically, when you assign a value to a variable, we saw in the previous slide, right? Count equal to 10. So equal to sign is generally for assigning value to a variable. The equal to is typically used for comparing. So basically, if player equal to John means if the player is John, right? Then we just say console.log the player is player. So basically, if a particular condition matches, then whatever you provide within the curly parenthesis gets executed. If not, you go into an else clause. So else, we just say console.log John is not available. So for example, if the value of the player is John, then when you execute this statement, it's a conditional execution. The computer first checks if the player variable has John, then it'll display the player is John. If for any reason, let's say player is Mary, then the if statement will fail. It will go to the else statement, and the else statement says John is not available. So you will see John is not available being displayed on the terminal. So it's a very simple conditional execution. The syntax is if a particular logical statement, if that is true, everything that you mention in the curly parenthesis will get executed. If the condition does not match or does not satisfy, then the else class gets executed. So this is something. So if else conditional execution statements are very often used in JavaScript. We'll see some examples in this project when we write the software. The second one is while loop. So if you want to do some repetitive things, so here is an example of while loop. So we declare a variable called number. It starts with 0, and while number less than or equal to 12. So this is the conditional statement. As long as the number is less than or equal to 12, whatever you specify within the curly parenthesis gets executed. So we just display console.log number. So initially, the value of a number is 0, and when we execute less than or equal to 12, which is true, it will display number 0. Plus, it also adds number equal to number plus 2. So it adds 2 more to the number. So this will go in a loop. We call it while loop, and until the number is greater than 12. As long as the number is less than or equal to 12, it keeps on displaying. So it will go from 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Moment the number becomes 14, it's no longer, this condition is no longer satisfied, right? Number 14 is no longer less than or equal to 12. It is greater than 12. So that's when the execution stops, and it goes to the next statement. So anything you want to do repetitive way, one of the ways of doing it is through while loop. Same effect can be done with for loop as well. So that's the next conditional execution statement used in JavaScript. So the way you do that is you have a reserved word called for. So we declare a variable called number 0. There are 3 segments in a for loop: the initialization segment and the conditional segment, which looks very similar to the while, and whatever you want to do after the condition is evaluated. So the number equal to number plus 2 is a third one. So and you go through that in a loop, and the function and the operation that you want to do is to display the number within the curly parenthesis. So it does exactly the same like the while loop. It's done in a different way. So if you know how many times you want to do, it's better to do it in a for loop. So depending upon the condition in your business logic for the program, you would use a while loop or a for loop to do things in a repetitive way. The last conditional execution is called a switch statement. So let's say you have let's say in the first case, right, we did the if statement for John. Let's say if you have 2-3 players, it is okay to use if then else statement. So if the player is John, you do X, Y, and Z. Else, if the player is Mary, you do A, B, and C. If the player is Philip, you do something else. So if you have a very short list of values for the player, you could do that. But if you have, let's say, 50 players, then it is much harder to keep on writing if then else, if then else, if then else, and that's not a very good way of writing programs. So JavaScript offers a cleaner way. We call it they call it switch. So the way it works is you have a reserved word called switch, and you switch on the player, and these are case statements. So you just jot down all the cases for all of your 20 or 50 players, and each one of the cases is one line. So for example, case John, you just display John is here and you break. So what does that mean? The computer will look at the value of the player, and if it matches with John, it will display John is here and it will break out of the switch statement. If it is Mary, Mary is here and it will break. And there is also a default statement that you can say, it doesn't match with any of the players that you have provided, and say no one is here. So this is a good way of doing multiple comparisons, and you can keep on adding to this statement as many players that you have. And so that's a lot more easier to read rather than a very cumbersome if then else statements. So sometimes they use switch in those instances where we have a large set of values to compare against a variable. In this case, our variable is player, and I have given only 2, but you can extend that to 20 if you want. So you'll have 20 case statements, and that'll be easier to understand as well for anybody who's reading your program. So these are some conditional execution statements. Just to recap, very simple if then else, a while loop for any repetitive operation that we want to do, and then a similar function for for loops. And if you have large values that you want to compare, then we use switch statements. If you need more information, please go to chapter number 2 of the book. They give you a lot more details in terms of how these conditional execution statements are used in JavaScript. Okay, so chapter number 3 in the book talks about functions. What is a function? So here is an example of a square function. So the way you do that is we declare a variable called square, and that is nothing but it takes a value from a function, and the function nothing but it takes an argument x. It returns x times x, which is a square function. So, and when we once this is complete, you can say console.log square of 12. So what does it mean? The square is a function, and it takes a value 12. So it multiplies 12 by 12, 144. So you will see that it displays 144 when all of this is complete. So basically, the functions take argument. In this case, it takes input argument as x, and it multiplies the input argument and then returns a value. So typically functions have parameters. They have a body. The body is nothing but the return x times x, and it returns values. There are scope of a variable. They can be global or local. Don't worry about that. I think as we write programs, we'll get to know whether a particular variable is inside a function or outside a function, and depending upon that, the scope can be very different. So that's on functions. We have very simple data structures that we will use in our project. Array is just a collection of data. So here is an example of an array. So we have declared a variable called friends, and the square brackets is typically used for defining an array of values, an array of objects, array of strings. For example, here we are declaring a variable called friends, which is an array, and array consists of 4 elements: John, Joe, Mary, and Beth, and they're all strings. So when somebody says friends, and the way you represent that, if you want to access a particular value within an array or element within an array, you use a curly parenthesis or a square parenthesis to access those. For example, when we say console.log friends curly parenthesis 2, we are referring to 0, 1, 2. So it will display Mary. So the friends of 0 will be John, friends of 1 will be Joe, friends of 2 will be Mary, and friends of 3 will be Beth. So this statement will display Mary as the value. So basically that is how we represent arrays in JavaScript. So like I just wanted to introduce you to some of the concepts, but as you start reading more on the book, you'll get more. And more importantly, as we write programs, things will become a lot more clearer. But it's good to have the concepts first described. Let me share my screen and show you some examples of the programs that we will be writing, and so that'll give you an idea. But I think, like I mentioned, in the next few classes we'll write actual programs. That's probably when you'll get a better appreciation for the functions, the arrays, all the stuff that we just talked about, the conditional statements. For example, here is a JavaScript program that we will be writing starting next week. So it's basically we are declaring a constant. It's a variable, and this is a function. It says require fs, and here is an if statement. If error, then we display something and return. And here are some examples of more statements. Console.log successfully read local JSON file, or console.log file data. File data is just a variable, and they will display whatever the value of that variable is. And we'll start showing you how to parse JSON files and so on. So here is one example, and let me see. This is one more example program that we will write starting next week. Here is a function that we'll call https.get, and here is the parameter, and then we will start writing the business logic for it and so on. All right. So, but starting next week, we'll start writing simple programs. I think we did the hello.js in the last class, and our very first program will be an M1 fruit. So starting next week, we'll start explaining what this program is, how do we write that, how do we run them, and how do we get results from node.js. Okay, so I think that concludes today's class. Okay, that concludes our class number 2. Now it is time for quiz. We have 6 questions for today's class. The first question is, what is the function to display output of your JavaScript program on the terminal, especially console window? Second question is, write a simple program to show how to use control statements. In this class, you would have learned about 4 control statements: for loop, while loop, if then else, and the switch statements. Third question is, what is the scope of a variable? Fourth question is, write a simple function to print days of the week, Sunday through Saturday, using any of the control statements. You can use a for loop, you can use switch statements, you can use while loop. Use one of them to print the days of the week. Question number 5, take a picture of your programs using the node.js. Of course, you would write all of these programs using node.js. Take a picture of your programs using smartphone camera and share. Last question,
compare JavaScript language with any other programming language that you've already learned, maybe Java or Python or C, C++, any language that you had learned in the past, if any. Compare this JavaScript language with the program language that you learned and share the differences and similarities. Uh, okay, so that concludes really the class number 2. Thank you for your time.